Istanbul, Turkey. March 2008. A man sits alone at a café overlooking the Bosphorus, scrolling through messages on his phone. He's been here for 45 minutes, checking his watch every few minutes, adjusting his collar, rehearsing what he'll say when she arrives. He doesn't know that the woman he's waiting for doesn't exist, that her profile was designed by psychological warfare specialists who studied his browsing history, his divorce records, his patterns of loneliness, that the cafe was chosen because surveillance cameras have been disabled in a 2-block radius, that in exactly 7 minutes, his entire operational network will begin to unravel because he couldn't resist the attention of someone who made him feel seen. The woman approaching him now, smiling as if recognizing an old friend, carries no weapon except her training. And by the time he realizes what's happening, it will be far too late. Before we dive in, hit subscribe to Mossad Classified. This channel uncovers secret missions, intelligence tactics, and covert history they never meant for the public to see. Khalil Mansour was not a household name. That was precisely why he mattered. While the world focused on terrorist leaders who appeared on wanted posters and gave fiery speeches from hidden bunkers, Mansour worked in the shadows that kept those organizations functioning. He coordinated weapons shipments through the Balkans. He managed cryptocurrency accounts that moved money across borders without triggering banking alerts. He recruited operatives through encrypted forums and arranged their training in remote camps. He was infrastructure. And in counter-terrorism, destroying infrastructure is often more effective than eliminating figureheads who can be replaced within weeks. Born in 1972 in Hebron, Mansour had grown up watching the First Intifada transform his neighborhood into a battlefield. He remembered soldiers searching his home at 3 in the morning, remembered his uncle arrested, and returned months later with stories he wouldn't repeat in front of children. These experiences created the foundation of his worldview, but what set him apart was his education. He studied computer science at Birzeit University, learned fluent English and Turkish, and understood that the future of resistance wasn't just guns and explosives, but digital networks and financial systems that could move resources faster than any intelligence service could track them. By his early 30s, Mansour had become indispensable to Hamas external operations. He didn't give orders or plan attacks. He made attacks possible by ensuring that when an operative needed equipment in Gaza, it materialized. When a cell required funding in Brussels, accounts were accessible. When communications needed to flow between Damascus and Khan Yunis, encrypted channels functioned flawlessly. He was the logistics coordinator who never appeared in organizational charts, but whose removal would cripple operations across multiple theaters simultaneously. Israeli intelligence had been tracking Mansour for 6 years before deciding he needed to be neutralized. Assassination was considered and rejected. Killing him in Damascus, where he lived under Syrian protection, would trigger diplomatic complications Israel couldn't afford at that particular moment. More importantly, dead men provide no intelligence. A corpse tells you nothing about upcoming operations, funding sources, or the identities of other network members, but a compromised logistics coordinator, someone whose communications you could monitor and whose movements you could predict, becomes an intelligence goldmine that keeps producing value for years. The problem was access. Mansour understood operational security better than most field operatives. He used burner phones that were discarded after single users. He communicated through encryption that even NSA analysts found challenging. He varied his routines obsessively, never eating at the same restaurant twice in a month, never following predictable patterns that surveillance teams could exploit. And he lived in Damascus under the protection of Syrian intelligence services that were hostile to Israeli operations and competent enough to make any direct approach extremely risky. But every target has vulnerabilities. For Mansour, the vulnerability was loneliness. His marriage had collapsed 2 years earlier. His ex-wife had taken their daughter back to Gaza, and the divorce proceedings had been bitter enough that she'd secured custody restrictions preventing him from seeing his child more than twice annually. Friends from university had scattered across the Middle East and Europe. His work demanded absolute secrecy, preventing him from forming genuine connections with anyone who didn't already operate in his world of encrypted communications and dead drops. He lived in a comfortable Damascus apartment surrounded by books and expensive electronics, but he lived alone. And that isolation created psychological pressure that built over months until it became a tactical weakness. Mossad's psychological assessment unit identified this pressure through patterns in his digital behavior. They monitored which websites he visited during late night hours when operational work paused. They analyzed the tone of his social media posts before he'd learned to maintain better operational discipline online. They tracked his purchases, noting the self-help books about dealing with divorce and the frequency with which he ordered delivery food rather than cooking for himself or dining out. Every data point painted the same picture of a man who was professionally successful, but personally adrift. Someone hungry for connection and validation in ways he probably didn't fully admit to himself. The operation was codenamed Lilac Wine, a reference deliberately chosen to evoke romance and intoxication. The planning consumed 8 months and involved contributions from specialists across multiple Mossad units. Psychologists created personality profiles predicting what type of woman Mansour would find attractive based on his previous relationships, his cultural background, and subtle preferences revealed through his online activity. Technical specialists built the digital infrastructure needed to create a convincing false identity that could withstand scrutiny from someone as security conscious as their target. Operational planners identified Istanbul as the ideal location for the trap, a city where Mansour traveled regularly for legitimate business meetings and where Mossad maintained excellent operational capabilities without the complications of working in Damascus. The woman selected to execute the operation was a Mossad agent we'll call Maya, though that was neither her real name nor the identity she would use with Mansour. She was 31 years old, spoke Arabic with a Damascene accent acquired during years of linguistic training, and had a background in psychology that helped her understand how to build emotional connections rapidly while maintaining the professional detachment necessary for intelligence work. She'd conducted similar operations before, though never one this complex or long-term. The assessment was that Mansour would require months of cultivation before he'd trust her enough to compromise his security. And Maya needed to be capable of sustaining that performance without error. Her cover identity was Layla Hassan, a Lebanese architect working for an international firm based in Istanbul. The legend was supported by an entire constructed life. Mossad created a professional website showcasing architectural projects Layla had supposedly designed, mixing real buildings with subtle alterations to architectural credits. They established social media profiles dating back years, filled with photographs, posts, and interactions that suggested a real person with real relationships. They rented an apartment in Istanbul's Beyoğlu district and furnished it with personal items, books, artwork, and photographs that matched Layla's supposed personality and background. Every detail was designed to withstand investigation from someone trained to detect deception. The approach began online in September 2007. Maya, operating as Layla, joined a professional networking forum for Middle Eastern architects and urban planners. Mansour participated in the same forum under his own cover identity as a technology consultant interested in smart city infrastructure. The choice of venue was deliberate. The forum was legitimate enough that Mansour's presence wouldn't seem suspicious, but specialized enough that their interaction could appear organic rather than suspiciously coincidental. Layla initiated contact through a comment on one of Mansour's posts about encrypted communication systems for municipal infrastructure. Her response was knowledgeable but not threatening, asking questions that demonstrated expertise while flattering his insights. Mansour responded, beginning a conversation thread that stretched over several days. The exchanges were professional initially, but Maya introduced subtle personal elements. A mention of working late because a project deadline was approaching. A joke about Turkish coffee being superior to Lebanese, inviting playful disagreement. Small intimacies that suggested she saw him as more than just another forum participant. Over the following weeks, their conversations migrated from public forum posts to private messages. Maya was patient, never pushing too hard, always letting Mansour feel like he was driving the relationship's development. She shared carefully constructed details about her fictional life, her work stress, her complicated relationship with her family, her thoughts about living as an expatriate in Turkey. Every disclosure was calculated to create reciprocal sharing from Mansour, establishing patterns of mutual vulnerability that would later become operational leverage. The psychological mechanics were straightforward, but required skillful execution. Humans are wired to reciprocate disclosure. When someone shares something personal, social norms create pressure to share something equally personal in return. Maya used this dynamic methodically, offering revelations calibrated to elicit corresponding revelations from Mansour. When he mentioned his divorce, she shared her own fictional history of a failed engagement. When he expressed frustration about work, she commiserated with stories about difficult clients and impossible deadlines. Each exchange deepened the perceived intimacy while providing Mossad analysts with information about his emotional state, his vulnerabilities, and his responsiveness to different conversational approaches. By November, they'd progressed to video calls. This escalation required additional technical preparation. Maya's apartment had been specifically set up as a believable backdrop for video conversations, with architectural drawings visible on walls, design books on shelves, and the ambient noise of Istanbul traffic providing authenticity. The video calls allowed Mansour to see her, to experience the attraction beyond text-based communication, and to begin forming the emotional attachment that would eventually override his security training. Maya understood the performance required careful balance. She couldn't be too available or too interested, which would trigger suspicion in someone as professionally paranoid as Mansour. She needed to seem genuinely busy with her own life, occasionally unavailable, requiring him to invest effort in maintaining the connection. Scarcity increases value. By not being constantly accessible, she made their interactions more precious, creating anticipation that heightened emotional investment. The operation entered its critical phase in January 2008, when Mansour mentioned he'd be traveling to Istanbul for business meetings in March. Maya's response was perfectly calibrated. Enthusiasm at the prospect of meeting in person, but without excessive eagerness that might seem suspicious. She suggested coffee, perhaps dinner if his schedule allowed, framing it casually enough that rejection wouldn't seem devastating, but acceptance would feel like a meaningful step forward in their relationship. Mansour agreed, and the operational timeline accelerated. The meeting location required careful selection. It needed to be public enough that Mansour would feel secure, but positioned to allow surveillance and control. The café overlooking the Bosphorus was chosen because it provided clear sight lines for observation teams, limited exits that could be monitored, and proximity to safe houses where Mansour could be taken if the operation required moving beyond mere surveillance. Quick reminder, if you're still watching, you're exactly the type of person this channel is made for. Subscribe to Mossad Classified for deep intelligence breakdowns, psychological warfare analysis, and the hidden truths behind the world's most feared agency. The first meeting occurred on March 14th at 3 in the afternoon. Mansour arrived early, as surveillance teams had predicted he would. Anxious people arrive early. He ordered tea but didn't drink it, checking his phone obsessively, adjusting his position in his chair. The body language revealed everything analysts needed to know. He was nerve-ested, vulnerable. Maya arrived exactly on time. Not early enough to seem desperate, but not late enough to seem disrespectful. She'd chosen her appearance carefully. Professional but approachable. Attractive but not overtly sexual in ways that might seem calculated. Her approach to his table was captured on cameras hidden in surrounding buildings, recording every moment of an encounter that had been choreographed for months, but needed to appear completely spontaneous. The greeting was warm, a handshake that lingered slightly longer than purely professional contact. Smiles that suggested genuine pleasure at finally meeting face to face. They sat, and the conversation flowed with the ease of people who'd spent months building rapport. Maya knew exactly which topics would engage him, which stories would make him laugh, which questions would flatter his expertise without seeming sycophantic. She'd practiced this performance countless times with psychologists playing Mansour's role, refining her approach until every gesture and phrase felt natural. What Mansour experienced as a delightful first meeting was actually a sophisticated intelligence operation with multiple layers of surveillance and control. 3 separate teams monitored the café from different positions. Technical specialists intercepted his phone's signals, copying every message and call. Analysts in Tel Aviv received real-time updates, assessing his emotional state through facial recognition software that measured expressions indicating attraction, trust, or suspicion. The entire encounter was designed to deepen his emotional investment while providing intelligence value even before any explicit cooperation or compromise occurred. The meeting lasted 2 hours. They discussed architecture, politics, their families, their hopes for the future. Maya performed brilliantly, creating moments of connection that felt profound to Mansour. A shared laugh about cultural misunderstandings. A serious conversation about the complexities of Middle Eastern politics, where she expressed views close enough to his own to create ideological affinity. A moment when their hands touched accidentally while reaching for the check, creating physical contact that introduced sexual possibility without explicit acknowledgement. When they parted, Mansour was transformed. The isolated, lonely logistics coordinator had experienced something he'd been missing for years: genuine connection with someone who seemed to understand him. The transformation was visible in his posture as he walked away, in the way he smiled at his phone reading her follow-up message thanking him for a lovely afternoon. He was hooked. The question was how deeply and how that emotional investment could be converted into operational access. Over the following months, the relationship deepened through a carefully orchestrated progression. More meetings in Istanbul when Mansour traveled there for business. Longer video calls where they'd talk late into the night about everything and nothing. The gradual introduction of physical intimacy during a weekend they spent together in May. When Maya judged that his emotional attachment was strong enough that sexual involvement would deepen rather than complicate the operation. The physical relationship created additional opportunities for intelligence collection. The hotel room where they spent that weekend was completely instrumented with hidden cameras and microphones. Every conversation was recorded, but more valuable than the recordings were the psychological shift that occurred. Sexual intimacy creates neurochemical bonding that can overwhelm rational threat assessment. Oxytocin released during physical contact reduces skepticism and increases trust. Mansour's brain was being chemically rewired to perceive Maya as someone safe, someone he could trust with vulnerabilities he'd never exposed to others. By summer 2008, Mansour was regularly sharing operational information without even realizing it. Not classified details about upcoming attacks, but contextual intelligence that helped Mossad understand Hamas network structure, funding flows, and decision-making processes. He'd mention frustrations with colleagues in Damascus. He'd complain about the difficulty of moving money through particular banking channels. He'd discuss his concerns about new security protocols that made communications more cumbersome. Each complaint was an intelligence treasure, providing insights into Hamas operations that would have been nearly impossible to acquire through traditional collection methods. Maya never explicitly recruited him as an agent. She never asked direct questions about his work or pushed for information that would trigger his security awareness. Instead, she created an emotional environment where sharing felt natural. She performed the role of supportive partner, so convincingly that Mansour began treating her as a confidant, someone who understood the stresses of his work, even though he never revealed the work's true nature. The operations structure allowed Mossad to maintain pressure on Hamas logistics networks, while preparing for the eventual moment when Mansour would need to be fully compromised or eliminated. Intelligence from the relationship enabled Israeli military operations against weapons shipments Mansour had helped coordinate. It allowed financial investigations that froze accounts he'd established. It provided advance warning of planned operations that could be disrupted through seemingly unrelated counter-terrorism activities. But the most valuable intelligence came from what Mansour revealed about himself: his routines, his security practices, his relationships with other Hamas operatives, his family connections that might be leveraged, his psychological vulnerabilities beyond loneliness, his ego, his need for validation, his resentment of colleagues who received more recognition for work he enabled. Every intimate conversation added layers to Mossad's understanding of their target, creating options for future operations that might require deeper compromise or extraction. The relationship continued for more than a year before Mossad decided to escalate. By late 2009, intelligence priorities had shifted. Hamas was planning operations that required immediate disruption rather than passive monitoring. The decision was made to push Mansour toward active cooperation, using the relationship with Maya as leverage to convert him from an unwitting intelligence source into a conscious agent working against his own organization. The approach came during a weekend in Istanbul in November 2009. Maya's performance shifted subtly. She seemed distracted. When Mansour pressed, she revealed a carefully constructed crisis. Her architectural firm was facing bankruptcy due to a client's fraud. She was at risk of losing everything: her job, her apartment, her ability to remain in Istanbul. The story was fiction, but the emotional vulnerability was performed with such conviction that Mansour immediately offered to help. This was the moment the operation had been building toward for more than 2 years. Maya expressed gratitude, but explained that the amounts involved were substantial, more than a friend could reasonably provide. Mansour insisted. He had access to resources. He could make transfers that wouldn't be traceable. He wanted to help. The offer came from genuine emotional attachment, but accepting it would create the compromise that would make him permanently controllable. Maya allowed herself to be convinced. The money transfer was arranged, and suddenly Mansour had created a permanent record linking himself to financial support for someone whose identity was completely fabricated by Israeli intelligence. If that relationship ever became known to Hamas security services, he would be investigated, possibly killed. He'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And now Mossad owned him completely. The explicit recruitment occurred 3 weeks later. Maya revealed her true affiliation during a private conversation in her Istanbul apartment. The revelation was devastating. Mansour's immediate reaction was rage and denial, but Maya handled the confrontation with professional skill. She emphasized that his feelings for her had been genuine, even if the context was not. She explained that he now faced a choice: cooperate and be protected, or refuse and face exposure to the organization he'd betrayed by transferring funds to an Israeli intelligence operation. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Mansour agreed to cooperate. Over the following months, he provided active intelligence about Hamas operations, communications, and planning. The relationship with Maya continued, though its nature had fundamentally changed. She was no longer a romantic partner, but a handler managing an asset. The emotional manipulation had served its purpose, transforming a hostile intelligence target into a controlled source providing information that saved lives and disrupted terrorist operations. The operation demonstrated seduction's effectiveness as an intelligence tool. It exploited universal human needs for connection and validation. It bypassed security protocols that could resist technical surveillance, but couldn't protect against emotional vulnerability. and it created compromise that could be leveraged indefinitely, turning targets into assets whose cooperation was sustained not by ideology, but by the impossibility of escape once they'd crossed certain lines. If this story kept you watching, then don't just leave. Join the inner circle. Subscribe to Mossad Classified and turn future episodes into automatic intel drops. But here's the question that should haunt anyone who understands this operation. If intelligence services can manipulate human emotion with such precision, if they can weaponize loneliness and manufacture love as operational tools, what does that say about the authenticity of any relationship in our hyper-surveyed world? How do you ever trust that the person who seems to see you, truly see you, isn't performing a role designed by psychologists who've mapped your vulnerabilities better than you understand them yourself? Sleep well with that thought.